as we've said now 12 other times, all conversations are deeply rooted in how we move the needle for students across our state. So a couple of housekeeping things. I will be popping back on toward the end of the session to field any questions that the audience has. So please feel free to chat with one another, but also use the Q&A section found at the bottom of the Zoom function. So make sure to ask those really thoughtful questions, and we will ask those of the panelists towards the end of the session. But without further ado, it is so fun for me to always introduce Graeme Thomas, who I often call my partner in crime. We've been working together now for 11 years. There would be no tnAchieves without Graeme. Many times I am sort of the wild, crazy one, and Graeme is very much the calming presence in my storm. And so without Graeme, sort of all things nuts would be happening at tnAchieves at any given time. He's also very much responsible for the 9,000 volunteers that we recruit every year to serve as volunteer mentors, traveling the state, always saying yes to any opportunity. So Graeme, it's all yours.
Well, that was, I think, your last chance to introduce me this week, and I actually saved the best one for the last. So thanks.
I was trying to be nice. Friday morning, I should be kind, right?
Friday morning. In the week on a high note. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today. We have Commissioner Dr. Penny Schwinn, who has been with the Tennessee Department of Education for almost 2 years now. I still remember the first time that I saw Dr. Schwinn speak. We were at a SCORE event. Chrissy and I were there together. And I remember the room was just captivated by what she had to say. I think it was really one of her first appearances in Tennessee since she had been hired, and everyone in the room kind of left motivated and excited to get to work, and excited to have Dr. Schwinn with us today. We also have Mr. Joey Hassell, who is the superintendent from Haywood County Schools. We have only been working in Haywood County for a year now. They were a former Ready County that has come under the tnAchieves umbrella in the last about 12 months. And Mr. Hassell has quickly become one of our champions in West Tennessee, in a region that we don't know very well. And I think he was maybe one of our first mentors to sign up in those 5 new counties that we picked up, or 7 new counties that we picked up a year ago. So we appreciate Mr. Hassell. He's someone who has quickly become on our speed dial when we need help navigating West Tennessee. Mr. Hassell, thanks for being here. And finally, we have Mr. Millard, who's the superintendent for Clarksville and Montgomery County Schools. And he is kind of I can say a lot of the same things about Mr. Hassell as about Mr. Hassell. He is our go-to person in Clarksville and in Montgomery County. He has been a mentor with us since the start, has helped us recruit mentors from within his school district, and has been really a champion of our program in Northern Middle Tennessee. So Mr. Hassell, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to start asking you all to just kind of give us an idea about for Mr. Hassell and Mr. House, I'll ask you both kind of give us a little bit of information about your districts, where you're located. People may not know where Haywood County or Montgomery County are if they're in different parts of the state. A little bit about your districts and the demographics of the students that you serve. And Commissioner Schwinn, we'll start with you. If you can give us just a little bit of an overview of the Department of Education and kind of the role you play across the state.
Sure, and happy to be here, I think, with 2 of our outstanding superintendents. It's always nice to see faces. We're so used to being on the phone. So yeah, I think when we think about kind of the whole of the state and the work that the Department of Education does, we're essentially seated where we report in some ways to the federal government and work closely with them on federal policies, closely with our state legislature and the administration as part of the executive branch to implement the laws set by our state legislature, and then with our districts, essentially trying to support their work in terms of what they're doing at the local level. We do believe strongly that local districts make the best decisions for their communities. And I think we've seen that in the pandemic, especially as we see superintendents who are navigating very uncharted waters, making sure they're doing what's best for their students in their communities. So our job is to really kind of create boundaries for that in terms of policy, but most importantly, to create supports to allow all of our districts to thrive. And I think we have seen that, especially over the last 6 months, as people are working really hard.
Great, thanks so much. Mr. Hassell.
Yeah, so Haywood County is in West Tennessee. We're in the southwest corner. We're located on I-40 between Jackson, Tennessee and Memphis. Our district serves about 2,900 students pre-K through 12. we are unique in that we're a rural community, but we are a majority minority African-American population. So we're unique in Tennessee as far as that. We are identified by the state as a distressed, or excuse me, as an at-risk county. We're not distressed. We've moved up to at risk. In our high school, we have about 800 students, and we graduate 230 a year. And Commissioner Schwinn was with us at our very special summer June 2020 graduation. She was our keynote this year, and we appreciated that. So, but just glad to be a part of Tennessee Achieves and seeing our students transition to post-secondary opportunities.
Thanks, Mr. Hassell. And if you don't follow Mr. Hassell on Twitter, he is a really good follow. So for our audience members today, find him on Twitter and give him a follow. Mr. House, what about your district?
Graeme, thank you and Chrissy both for having us this morning. In the Clarksville, Montgomery County school system, we're in the Mid-Cumberland region. We of course have a mission to educate and empower our students to reach their potential. We're the 6th or 7th largest school system in Tennessee, serving about 37,000 students. We're about 30 minutes north of Nashville. We butt right up against the Kentucky line. We're one of the fastest growing communities in the state of Tennessee. Before the pandemic, we were seeing anywhere between 700 and 1,200 students a year being added to our rolls. Clarksville is a military town, and about 13,000 of our students are military connected. We're one of the most diverse communities that you'll find in the state of Tennessee as well. There are nearly 3,000 students in our system that speak a language other than English. We have 70 languages spoken, representing 77 countries across the world. 54% of our students qualify for free or reduced lunch. We're very proud of the continued progress around graduation rate, overall performance that continue to happen with the support of our Department of Education, as well as outside sources as well.
Well, thank you all for kind of providing that brief information and introduction there. I'm really excited about this panel because I think we have two school districts that are very different sizes, but both extremely diverse, and I'm really excited to kind of dig into what Tennessee Promise and Tennessee Achieves has meant for your communities. But before we do that, Commissioner Schwinn, I'm going to kind of ask you to kind of give us kind of a broad statewide view. What has Tennessee Promise meant for the state, and what has it meant for the school districts across the state?
Yeah, sure. And I think that one of the things that is important just from a framing perspective is that Tennessee has a longstanding history of moving the needle forward and promoting and accelerating achievement for students. And I think that that continuity in terms of mission and vision from the state level that goes back now a dozen years plus, that allows for programs like these and initiatives like these to really serve students over time. And it is a national model in that way, because many other states have one and done kind of start and stop initiatives, and you don't see that continuity. I think that's really important for our district. So when you see things like Tennessee Promise that gives students kind of last dollar scholarships so that they can go to community college or a TCAT, be able to do that for free, reduce those financial barriers, it provides a level of access and opportunity for all of our students across the state. That is very unique, I think, when you think about that on the national landscape. But certainly as our superintendents and local school districts are providing students with different pathways and options after high school, they don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to be able to afford those first 2 years. And that's critically important for so many of our students. And I think the partner to that is we know that there's lots of things that we do in public schools. Certainly academic and education and achievement is our primary goal, but there are so many other things that happen in our schools. And one of those is around academic advising and counseling. And so, oftentimes resource allocation around making sure every student gets the individual support that he or she needs. It requires more than what our school systems can necessarily afford. And so I think that when we look at Tennessee Achieves and the ability for folks in the community who do have experiences, who can mentor and support our students, it provides another layer of academic advising and capacity building and support in a much more community, I think, very Tennessee way. And I know that that is critically important for our school districts as they are thinking about the best way to support each individual student. And I think you've got two examples, like I said, of superintendents who are doing that remarkably well and care deeply about their kids and their community.
Commissioner Schwinn, I remember when we were launching Tennessee Promise and even Tennessee Achieves prior in our 27 communities around the state, if there was one kind of knock on Tennessee Promise or Tennessee Achieves at the time, there was some kind of a little bit of conversation about maybe free college would no longer incentivize students to work hard, that test scores may go down, things like that. Any evidence of that you can see?
No, I don't see that. I think that what we're seeing is that opportunity and access to opportunity matters deeply. And so limiting that as some kind of balancing act does not make sense. We want to make sure that we open up as many opportunities and possibilities for students that we can. That is actually our responsibility in the field of education. And I think what we're seeing is that more and more students are taking advantage of post-secondary opportunities. We're seeing students, whether they're in CTE programs or not, same access. We're seeing students who are thinking about post-secondary as an option that they might not have before. And I think that's incredibly important for our rural communities, our students who may come from low-income communities, our urban students. And I think we're seeing that at higher rates and greater acceleration than other parts of the country. And it's because of things like this and leaders that we have in our districts right now.
Great, thanks so much. Mr. House, talk to us a little bit about at the district level. What has Tennessee Promise done for Clarksville and Montgomery County, and what has it meant for the college-going culture in your community?
Thanks, Graeme. You know, when I think about what it's meant to the Clarksville, Montgomery County school districts and many other school districts across the state, I think about equity. Yeah, I was a former athlete in college and in high school, and what came along with my enrollment in college was a lot of support. And when I think about the parallels between my experience as an athlete and the support to ensure that I was successful, not only in the classroom, but also on the basketball court, came with mentorship, came with other supports. And those are the kind of supports that are critically important for our highest need students to be successful. And we've seen that in Montgomery County. That is an equity issue. Many of our students that are first-time college goers have to have support. My wife serves not only as a employee at Austin Peay State University, but she also serves as a Tennessee Achieves mentor. And so we partnered up on the 3 students that she worked with here in Montgomery County. And what I saw was a glimmer of hope and an opportunity to really push students beyond the cusp of what they may have ever seen before in their careers and what they might see down the road in their lives. So it's critically important that access and opportunity and mentorship continue to be pushed. It's been pushed highly at a very high level here in Montgomery County. That academic advising and support, as Commissioner Schwinn talked about, is critical as well. So those pieces have been a big push, and it's one of the reasons why we're seeing so many students strive towards an associate's degree, strive towards a bachelor's degree, and we're hopeful that those numbers will continue to grow.
Mr. House, when we're talking about access, you mentioned Austin Peay is right in your backyard, which is a Tennessee Promise eligible 4-year university. You have a Nashville State campus there. You have a TCAT. What does that mean for opportunities for your students to have those kinds of access points right in your own backyard?
It's huge. 2 of the 3, Austin Peay, TCAT, we have direct partnerships with. We have a middle college on the campus of Austin Peay. We also have an early college on the campus of TCAT. And we have more and more kids that are interested. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in one of those programs, but the access being right here in Montgomery County is huge for our students. Not only have we had the opportunity to have a steady, strong graduation rate of close to 95%, but we've also seen more kids that have an earlier access point, but develop a plan with the support of their mentors, as well as starting at the elementary and middle school level, developing what that interest can look like as they move towards their careers.
Yes, sir. Having those access points right there has got to be such an advantage for you. Mr. Hassell, you have led not only Haywood County schools, but you've led 3 school districts in rural West Tennessee. Talk about some of the challenges in creating a college-going culture in a rural school district, and maybe what Tennessee Promise has done to ease some of those challenges.
Yeah, Graeme, I've been fortunate to serve students in Lake, Lauderdale, and now Haywood County. And I think, Commissioner Schwinn and Superintendent House nailed it with access, opportunity, and equity for the three communities that I've served, which have a high poverty rate, high unemployment rates. Access for so long was a challenge, and then creating the opportunities, and then equitable opportunities. So what Tennessee Promise has done is it's created those opportunities. It's created a path for students to see themselves in a post-secondary situation. And one of the biggest challenges is just finances, the ability to pay for it. And so that barrier is removed now for students. And also it allows them to focus other resources on transportation. In our area, I still am amazed and disheartened when I'm talk to students who they want to go to post-secondary, but like getting to a community college or getting to a TCAT is a problem because of transportation. So with Tennessee Promise providing that last dollar, and then the Tennessee Achieves mentors supporting our students, you can get the college set up, and then allows you to work with students to align other resources so that transportation can be fixed. So, for us, what it's done is it's opened, the access and the opportunity. And what we saw in 2019 is that Haywood High School surpassed the state's average on college going rate. So we were very excited to see that. We're anxious to see what 2020 holds. Do have concerns with the impact of COVID, and maybe students opted not to pursue, and we're still following up with our students about that. But I think the big thing for us, and we've seen it right here in our community, is that more students are accessing those college opportunities, whether it's for us, our partners are Jackson State, TCAT, University of Memphis, Tennessee State's a big partner for Haywood County. But most of our students are transitioning to one of our local TCATs or to Jackson State Community College with plans to push on to 4-year. And just the fact that we're now above that college going rate is something to celebrate in Haywood County.
Absolutely something to celebrate. I remember our first meeting in Haywood County. We had an assistant principal from Jefferson County on one of our panels earlier in the week, and Christy and I were talking about how it was one of our most memorable meetings, and Haywood ranks up there too. I remember after we discussed where all the good food was, good barbecue and good burgers, then moved on to the reason I came to discuss Tennessee Promise. And we were talking about our summer bridge program, which unfortunately we weren't able to run this year due to the pandemic. But you were talking about the challenge being that you were a pretty good distance away from Jackson State, where we operate the program. And you immediately, really without thinking too long about it, offered to pay for a bus to get your students there. And I think it was the first county that has had that specific transportation problem that you just went and tackled it head on. So what are some of those challenges, being a little more rurally located, a little further away from the campuses, and how do you tackle some of those?
Well, one is transportation. As we referenced, you would think 30 miles is not that big of a deal, but if you don't have a car, you don't have reliable transportation, and there aren't many Lyfts and Ubers available for us here in Brownsville. But it's just getting there, and also it's another challenge with that is we still in the three communities that I've served do have a large number of students that will be first time college going. They'll be the first in their families to go to college. So they don't until Tennessee Achieves came on and we had the strong mentoring, they don't have individuals who really can help them navigate all the barriers that exist. And I say barriers, not necessarily negative, but there are challenges in getting everything completed and meeting deadlines and understanding everything. So the big ones for us are transportation, and then just navigating all the processes. And I would say in all three counties that had remained a challenge that we've seen open up with Tennessee Promise, and especially with our strong partnership with Tennessee Achieves.
Yeah. was a fun meeting. I enjoyed coming to Brownsville today.
We like to have fun meetings, right?
Yes,
We like to have fun. So.
The whole team was there. It's always good when you walk in and there's a whole team gathered. Commissioner Schwinn, both Mr. Hassell and Mr. Hassell have kind of touched on the mentoring part of our program. As you know, we recruit more than 9,000 mentors annually to support students while they're transitioning from high school to college. One, why is that non-financial support so important? But also, why is it important for our school districts across the state that we have these 9,000 people engaged as advocates for higher education that may otherwise not be or just wouldn't have the opportunity?
Yeah, so I think there's two purposes there in terms of why this is so important. So first, if we think about the student as kind of the most important thing that we're all working to help support, and many of us take for granted some of the supports we received as we were navigating college applications and what am I going to do with my life and what do I major in and financial aid, et cetera. I certainly know that, I had the very great fortune of having a mom who was a teacher, who could walk me through, who could write checks for college applications, who understood how to go to the financial aid office, who could drop me off. But those are all, these are students who are living at home and all of a sudden they're dropped into a very different environment in many cases. And that navigation process is critically important. So for students who might not have families who can provide that support. Maybe they're the first in their family to go to college or enter into post-secondary programs. Maybe they have families who are deployed. Maybe they have families who are working extra hours, and they need just additional, very targeted support. Being able to provide that in a way that helps students navigate certainly ensures that we have more students who transition into post-secondary opportunities, but that they persist in those over time. And so I think that there's something critically important for our children around equity, access, and opportunity so that there is no barrier, not just financially as Tennessee Promise provides, but certainly in some of those social navigations and that social capital that we're helping build up so that they can, again, become independent and achieve whatever goals they've set for themselves. But I also think on the other end, for those who are serving as mentors for students, there is a real benefit of what you get out of that. It is one, understanding our education system, the needs, the resources, the hard work, everything that goes in to ensuring that when children graduate from high school, they are set up for success. Being able to have just a deeper understanding of that work. And certainly, I think any educator knows that there is a level of joy, satisfaction, and personal fulfillment that you get with every single student that you support and help. And so I think that you are certainly giving to a student, but I don't want to underscore how much you get back whenever you are participating in something where you're mentoring a student to success and being able to see the fruits of that. It's incredibly important work. And that is why Tennessee is leading in this and has been leading in this for a number of years.
I think you touched on something there that's really important that it is often overlooked and that we probably don't do a good job sharing even with our stakeholders. But that piece about engaging people in the process that is maybe brand new for them. I think specifically, immediately I had kind of like an alarm going off in my head about our TCATs. A lot of our mentors have no clue what a TCAT is. And unfortunately, we had a TCAT president's panel earlier in the week, and I told them that they may be the best kept secret in Tennessee. That's really unfortunate because they have such high success rates. But we have a lot of our mentors that come from business and industry that now have, I think, a really great appreciation and understanding of what a TCAT is. I also think of our business and industry mentors that come and realize how many challenges there are, how much the process has changed since, I think of one of our board members who's been a mentor. He always tells the story of going to the gym at some point over the summer and like you walk around the tables and sign up for classes. And so learning that this whole new process exists is really good perspective for people that are really working to push workforce around Tennessee. Mr. House, Mr. Hassell, I'm going to ask you both the same question. You have both served as mentors. Why do you think it's important that students get a mentor? Why did you decide to serve in that role? And do you have any fun stories, favorite stories you'd like to share with us?
I'll jump out there. I think people in Tennessee have to understand that as we talk about Tennessee Achieves, that it's beyond just the funding. The funding is a great mechanism, and it does allow for a number of students to have the opportunity. But what we have to understand is that that's just a part of really mitigating the risk of students not going to college. Students are missing those individuals in their lives that may not have had the experience to, as the commissioner indicated, understand what it is to navigate the waters of an application. understand what it is to really continue to push forward when there's an obstacle in the way. And that's what we have to understand. Many of our students have challenges that are beyond the educational institutions that they're in on a daily basis. And it is a two-way street in terms of development for mentors and students. And I think that's extremely important for people to understand. As a former principal in a school that had a 95% free lunch rate, it was interesting to see the challenges that many of those kids had that many of my teachers never had in their lives. And tnAchieves is an opportunity to see that. So I can't stress the importance enough that ensuring that mentorship is prioritized at a high level, pushing in our communities to get more mentors out there, to make sure that those relationships are grown around an understanding. It's not just about telling a student what to do. It's about helping a student develop and feel comfortable about being in a space that's going to be very unfamiliar to him for 3 to 5 years over the course of time.
For me, in terms of serving as a mentor, as we were seeking, or as Graeme referenced earlier, we joined tnAchieves last year, and I remember, I think it was Ben that emailed me, and we had like 0 mentors signed up, and I was like, oh, we're last. And so I sent out a blast, and I reached out to our chamber and stuff, and we had the single highest growth in one day. And then we actually ended up achieving more mentors than we needed for our graduates. And what I was amazed by is how quickly folks joined in. So one, if I was going to ask the community, even though I have children of my own who are in school, I felt like I needed to also connect with our students as a mentor. So that was important. I think, the community, learning about the community through your mentor is so important for the student, but it's also so important for our community, as the commissioner said, to learn about our kids. And call me Pollyanna if you want to, but I, for one, believe this next generation of leaders is going to be phenomenal. I get to see some of the most amazing humans every day in the work that I do. And the 5 students that I mentored, I'll be honest, the first text I sent, I thought, I'd get a reply back like adults do. A few of them, it was 2 or 3 days before they responded. They didn't seem too excited to have their superintendent as their mentor. But anyway, they met their deadlines and everything was good, good. And then COVID hit and it slowed us down, and everything was communication by email or text. I did harass our folks about their volunteer hours, and I even had folks, one of our guys came in and helped us bag lunches and serve students during our school nutrition time, and lots of other staff members that were mentoring kids did that. And then y'all released the guidance that y'all were relaxing the volunteer hours, but our students, benefited from that as well. So for me, I think the relationship back and forth is so important, because kids learn about the community through their mentor, but also our community folks learn so much about our next generation of leaders, and that's so important.
My dad and grandfather were both educators, and my dad always told a story about how terrible it was to have his father as his principal. So maybe you had some of that going on, superintendent student relationship there. Mr. Hassell, I'll stick with you. And Mr. House, I'm going to ask you the same question. The third component of tnAchieves, that we talk about the financial piece, we talk about the mentor piece, and the community service piece that you mentioned oftentimes gets totally overlooked. What are some of the things that you're seeing students do in your community, and why do you think it's important that students start to give back now?
Well, I think, again, the biggest thing is they go out to volunteer. They get to see parts of the community that maybe they've not been exposed to. Even though we're a small community, just engaging in a different activity opens your eyes to different possibilities. So I think that's important. And we've had students that have helped with our Carl Perkins Child Abuse Center, fundraising events, our Arts Council fundraising events. If there's a fundraising event, it's not uncommon to see multiple members of your senior class there volunteering. I think one that I'm very excited about, and a student emailed us just a few weeks ago when the high school principal responded yesterday. We have a student that's in the class of 2021 that reached out to us with a proposal as high school seniors to tutor virtually our students that are doing virtual learning kindergarten through 8th grade. So what I appreciate is the way they think outside the box, and they're looking for opportunities to capture those hours. So we'll be sharing more about that with you, Graeme. But this was a student idea, student led, with our class of 2020 helping our younger kids with some of the technology challenges and curriculum challenges we face in ramping up our virtual academy. But that's a great way to get those hours, plus build relationships with younger children and talk about why they're doing those hours, which then again just goes into building that strong college going culture that we want to build through Tennessee Achieves.
Yeah, I completely agree with Joey. We've seen many of those same effects here in Montgomery County. But on top of that, one of the most compelling things that I've seen is our community jump on board and see that community pressure. And what I mean by community pressure, they see that there's a major need out there. So not only our city, our county, local nonprofits, the private businesses that are moving into Montgomery County are all stepping up and saying, how can we help? What opportunities, can we provide? And I think when you have a county or a city that really starts to grow in that kind of manner, you have a better community. So the more opportunities we have to ensure that students have the opportunity to serve and do those community service hours, the diverse nature of what that looks like, it only feeds what Tennessee Achieves is all about. We've seen some of the kids that have done community service hours with local organizations that end up employed there. So that's what it's all about. So it's made us a stronger, more close-knit community and be more open to different opportunities that are out there for our children.
That's great. I like both of those perspectives. And Mr. Hassell, I'm excited to learn more about that specific opportunity that your students created. Commissioner Schwinn, in Tennessee, we are really focused on closing equity gaps related to college access and achievement. What else can we be doing in Tennessee to support students from our most vulnerable populations?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think one that is particularly near and dear to my heart. So I think about access and opportunity. I've spoken a little bit about, I went to kind of what would now be considered priority schools in elementary school, had a parent who moved me 10 miles up the road and went to a very, very different set of schools, some of the highest performing schools in my home state. And the difference it wasn't in the quality of the teachers. It wasn't in the hard work in the schools. It was literally just in access and opportunities to resources, access and opportunities to programs and investments, and how we think about what is possible for all students. It really was about kind of expectations that kind of the system had. And I think that one of the things that we've done really well in Tennessee is around data sharing, making sure that we're using data and information as a way to inform ourselves so we can make better decisions and more informed decisions to support all students. I think that the programs that we're rolling out and have been rolling out over the last 12 years have really been about ensuring that every child has access to different opportunities regardless of where they live. Now, what the pandemic, I think, has brought to light is that there's still ways to go. And that's the truth about education in general. We are always evolving in how we think about our work. But certainly when I think about rural West Tennessee, access to the internet, access to devices in the home, I know that Director Hassell's had to spend quite a bit of time thinking about how do we ensure not just that families at home have internet, but all the students have devices because they're all learning at the same time, and how do we rotate schedules that way? When I think about Director House and the conversations we've had about how is he thinking very critically about the needs of a very diverse community, all who have slightly different needs and preferences, and essentially having to run 3 or 4 different school systems at once in a very large district. Those are just 2 of 147 districts that represent over 1 million kids in this state. And so when we think about access to advanced courses, we have very, very small high schools who they can't offer every AP class. There isn't the money and there aren't the resources and teachers. Can we create a statewide option where we allow for an AP chemistry teacher, and it doesn't reduce the BEP for districts? It just allows for students to use online learning to access AP classes. for all kids, regardless of where they live? Can we think about CTE and STEM and innovative programs where we provide districts grants to be able to make those strong connections and have the ability to craft programs at their local level, regardless of where a child lives? And I think finally, when we think about educators and we think about vacancies, we think about retirements that may be upcoming, we've had some incredible work in Grow Your Own. Clarksville, Montgomery was kind of the flagship district to launch that has now become, it was one district, then 3, and now we're at over 34 districts. The largest Grow Your Own program in the country is right here in Tennessee. And that is about ensuring there is not a barrier to becoming one of our exceptional educators. You can be an educator, go through your college, build on Tennessee Promise, become a teacher for free, get paid to do so, and stay in the community that you want to stay in. That provides a more diverse workforce. It means that our rural communities can be fully staffed, and it means we can start to place in special education, math, and science. And too often it is our students from our most vulnerable populations who do not have those teachers in front of them. So those are a few things I think that we're working on as a state and think as a path forward. You got 2 great examples of people who are leading the way on this equity conversation, though.
Yes, ma'am. And we have some really incredible data systems here in Tennessee that when we talk to some of our other partners that come in around the country that want to do programs like tnAchieves and Tennessee Promise, they're very envious of the data that we have and the fact that we're able to follow it. I know we certainly appreciate here at tnAchieves. Mr. House, Mr. Hassell, I'll ask you kind of a similar question, but more at a district level. What are you doing to support these students that are coming from our most vulnerable populations?
Go ahead, Joey.
All right. Well, one, I think as we think about the work of tnAchieves, I think that some of the processes, like just as the commissioner referenced, the application process, the FAFSA filing, meeting those submission dates, like for our vulnerable populations, like having someone to coach and work. Obviously, our counselors do great work, but having an additional set of hands to ensure that the deadlines are met and all of those things happen. Like those are simple things we think, but they're very important because without those deadlines, nothing else happens. So we have to think about that. But beyond that, we're fortunate in that we are a Gear Up district. We were part of 2.0 and now we're part of 3.0. So we really focus on college visits, that counseling, advising, financial aid and counseling, and we do a lot of student workshops, a lot of ACT prep and tutoring. And we have a large number of students that participate in that, whether it's after school, throughout the school day or on the weekends. So we create additional opportunities beyond the school day, for students to be aware that access and opportunity exists. And visiting a college campus. And the joy of Gear Up is if you've got 30 seniors who say, I want to go to Clarksville and visit Austin Peay, which we do, we put them on a bus and we head to Austin Peay. That's looked different, with COVID, but however, those things exist and they'll exist again in the future. And I do want to, say, and I appreciate the commissioner sharing that, broadband for us is a real challenge. We have put devices in students' hands very quickly. And the commissioner's team at the department, Sam Piercy and folks have been so amazing to work with rural districts because we do lack some of the infrastructure. And, in my role, I've not just superintendent, but I do a lot with budget. I do a lot with curriculum because we do lots of things in rural districts. So the commissioner's team has really helped us remove some barriers there. I do think we've got to have a larger broadband conversation because in 2020, like internet access and that's just a part of, K-12 and post-secondary, and it needs to become a broader conversation. And I think it will. And then the Grow Your Own in Austin Peay and Clarksville, Montgomery certainly were the leaders there, but we were fortunate to be tagged with Tennessee State, who is a strong partner of ours, and be one of those 35 Grow Your Own districts. So we're very excited to see students take secondary opportunities, maybe be employed with us as an educational assistant, but complete, that education degree to be dual certified in elementary ed and English language learning or, general ed and special ed, and lots of success opportunities there.
Yeah, that's great. Mr. House?
Joey said it well. For us, it's been about early career education exposure. So we've integrated that into to how we educate our students. Each one of our high schools has an academy. We have an academy of business and finance, a STEM academy, an academy of plant and animal systems, an academy of computer information technology, an academy of health and science, an academy of media arts and technology, and a criminal justice and homeland security academy. And most recently, we opened our newest academy at West Creek High School, which is our Academy of Teaching and Learning. And it's directly connected with what Dr. Schwinn indicated, our Grow Your Own program, where we have 20 students that now come out of that program that go into what Joey Hassell indicated, a teacher assistant's position, that take night courses at Austin P, but they're working in some of our highest need schools with level 5 teachers that are developing the skills to become great educators. And what better way to do that, but to do it in your community where you already have a footprint and a commitment. So we're excited about providing that early career exposure on a consistent basis to ensure that our kids continue to grow. We've also seen our community jump aboard as well to provide opportunities like internships, externships, different opportunities to see what it can look like on the job. We have 6th and 7th grade career fairs, so we can bring that being there experience to the community, right into the ears of our students. So of course, this year is going to be a little bit different in terms of what that looks like. So we're working on a virtual career fair for our students, but those are some of the things that are going on in Montgomery County that we want to continue to refine and continue to push for our kids.
Okay. Let me ask you all one more question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, really quick, just to bridge some of the things that I think they both mentioned. I think when you think about going into this year around kind of the access to experiences and then internet, like we do have to get to a place where high-speed internet is a public utility or something close to that, just from an access perspective. We have a post-secondary task force, and what they have found is that too many of our students after high school, even if they are given these resources in high school, and you've got 2 districts who have been on top of getting grants and supports and resources to kids, but when they want to transition into college or post-secondary, they don't have a device, they don't have access to the internet. And in this year, that's become incredibly hard as colleges are thinking about who's open, who's not, how do I apply, how do I get access? That becomes incredibly important and a barrier to some of that transition work. And similarly, when you think about those early career experiences that both of them just spoke to, you also think about how important that is right now, as you want to make sure that students are being able to navigate an even more challenging environment. So those two together, I think, have been areas that we've been working on as a state, but have just been accelerated and escalated in terms of the discourse across the state on why it's so important, not just in pre-K-12, but in that really critical transition period to give kids access and opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely critically important. I'm going to ask our panelists one more question, kind of a fun question that we ask all of our panelists. And then I said we have a few audience questions. Certainly want to make sure we get to those. If you do have questions for our panelists, please go ahead and type those in now so that we can get to them. Commissioner Schwinn, we'll start with you. The question is, what is something that you learned from your very first job? And when I say very first job, I don't mean like your first professional job. Like I umpire baseball games. Chrissy, I think I've heard her say a dozen times now, made snow cones at the county fair. But what was your very first job, and what's a lesson you took away from that you still can apply today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was going to say, so you're going to harken back to a babysitter or a barista. So no, so my first professional job was teaching. I was a high school teacher in Baltimore, Maryland, because it was the farthest place away from my hometown. And I think when I drove up on that first day of work, I was a high school teacher. I taught 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And that first homeroom class, and standing outside the door with my syllabus, thinking that I knew what I was doing to shake that first student's hand. I think that the biggest lesson I learned is that the amount of, you can prepare as much as you want, but it is all about implementation and how you actually implement that work. And how you do that with the person you are trying to support in mind. It is not about kind of the best of intentions on your end, but are you thinking about that child that's in front of you and what he or she needs? Those kids of mine are now in their early 30s. They have kids of their own in school, and many of them are doing amazing things, and all of them are wonderful, beautiful people. But when I think about that first class, that is the lesson that I learned. You've got to build things with how are you going to actually get it done, and how are you going to get it done in the way that serves the person that you're trying to serve. But teaching is the hardest, best job I ever had. And it is a very hard job to do well.
Absolutely. Mr. House, Mr. Hassell, who wants to go next?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I actually started out doing 2 professional jobs at one time, much like Dr. Schwinn and probably Joey as well. I was a teacher, but worked part-time as a certified barber in a barbershop. So it provided an opportunity for me to do the work, get to know my community in that barbershop, while educating many of the kids that I would see on Saturdays and after 5 o'clock. Most gratifying thing I could have ever done in simultaneously in doing both of those jobs. I worked in one of the second lowest performing school in the state of Oklahoma at that time. And we grew and did some special things, ended up moving literally a mile down the road and worked in the lowest performing school in the state as a principal. And that work was extremely gratifying, staying in the community that I grew up in, watching a difference being made student by student, developing those relationships. I think the thing that came out of that work that was so compelling for me is that you have to watch every word that you say in terms of how you treat students, how you treat employees, because later down the road, those relationships will come back in a positive or negative way. And I'm very, very fortunate to say that I've had, story after story and having to work with students over the course of time, teachers over the course of time that have developed into principals, kids that have developed into teachers and other professionals that has allowed for those journeys to be extremely gratifying.
Mr. Hassell.
Yeah, similar to both Commissioner Schwinn and Superintendent House. I remember my teaching was my first professional job. I was a lifeguard, and then I drove a delivery van for a florist and a caterer. I flipped a wedding cake one time on the way to Freed Hardeman. You should have seen me trying to put that joker back together. It looked too good. But anyway, my first teaching opportunity was in Lauderdale County, and I was teaching it was a blended class, 2nd and 3rd grade, and my degree was special education. I had 24 students, and I went in and I just was not very good at first. So, the first semester was tough. And so over winter break, I really got it together, and I was much better in the spring. But I think the most important thing I would say, from the first job was that no matter where you are in an organization, you can lead. And in leading, if you see challenges, you should always advocate for what's right. And I think that's part of the challenge with going to college. There are barriers. So we've got to learn to advocate for ourselves. We've got to learn to advocate for those who maybe face challenges, and learn to just lead from where you serve in an organization. And I'm blessed to work in a system where folks lead every day from the various roles that they serve.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you all taking my questions. Now's the hard part, right? Chrissy's back and is going to ask the audience questions. Chrissy, do we have anything from the audience so far?
We do. We have some really great questions. First, I want to say thank you for this robust conversation specifically around equity and access. It's been really great and thoughtful. Thank you. So one of the questions actually resonates with me throughout the 12-year journey I've had with Knox Achieves and Tennessee Achieves and Tennessee Promise. We continue to receive pushback around students who have ACT scores that lead to remedial courses their first or second semester of post-secondary, students who have lower GPAs. And the pushback comes in that these students don't try very hard, and therefore they should not pursue post-secondary because the trend will then continue into college. I'd love your perspective on what I think to be a really misguided thought around this important group of students. In fact, the student that Knox Achieves was launched 12 years ago to serve.
It's a great piece. I'll jump out there, Chrissy. I was that kid. I was that kid on an IEP, diagnosed with dyslexia, a speech impediment. Being kind of pushed towards the military, and it was mentorship through coaches and a great mother and father that helped develop that support. And I only share that because with the right mentorship and support, regardless of what that ACT score is, regardless of what that GPA is, kids can continue to develop. The research tells us that some kids don't get their momentum until a little bit later. I was one of those students. So it's so critically important to not categorize our kiddos into this box that they should go one particular place or one avenue is only for them. To me, that's offensive, and it's definitely something that shouldn't be practiced in public education.
Yeah, I find it offensive as well. I think that's a great, kind word that we can use to describe it. Commissioner, did you have thoughts?
I do, and I think similar to Millard, it is for the student to determine what he or she wants to do and what he or she wants to achieve in his or her life. So it is, I think, our responsibility as adults, but very importantly, our responsibility as adults in public education are to foster the dreams and goals of all of our students, to help them understand that they can reach even higher than they thought that they could, and to ensure that those conversations, that level of support and ambition that we want to bring in every single student, not just in some students. And I certainly would say that should not be determined by a test score on a day. That is not, we are so much more than that one score. We are so much more than that one bad day or that one grade. And as educators, we see students develop in all different paces and in all different ways. And one of the things that I think we have learned in the last 30 years in public education is that we have to hold those same high expectations, foster those dreams for all kids. Too often in our history, we have not done that. And we've seen large groups of folks who have not gotten the same opportunities as a result. So it is our responsibility and our moral imperative to ensure that we give every child a chance. And that we ensure that if they want to be a doctor, a superintendent, a welder, my cousin is a barber and he loves it, whatever it is that they want to do, that's our job. Our job is about building dreams and building confidence. And so I feel as strongly as Millard, and I cannot wait for Joey to chime in on this. But this is why we do the work for all kids at all times.
I have to be careful here because I can get pretty fired up in this category.
Get fired up. I like it.
With my special ed background. But I think it speaks to what we saw with tnTP's opportunity myth about students not having access to grade level standards, not having access to strong instruction, not having access to deep engaging activities in that classroom, and then most importantly, high expectations. I mean, I have to be careful. It just really irks the heck out of me for folks not to have the right expectations for children. And I think we've seen growth in that area in our state over, the past 10 years, but we are not sorting mechanisms. We are dream builders. And if a student wants to pursue that goal, I tell our staff all the time, I do not want to hear or have a parent call me and say their child was directed to this path because of their GPA or their ACT score. If they have a dream and they understand the hard work behind it, then we need to create that path for them. Be honest and say there are going to be some challenges and some barriers, but let's work on how we remove those barriers and erase the challenges and see more success. We have got to stop placing labels on kids and individuals and just give them a chance to pursue their goals. That was a PG version of me.
That was very PG, actually. That was very good. No, in our work, I think what we see is with the right layers of support that is personalized and targeted for each individual student, right? Like what works for Millard doesn't work for Joey, and what works for Chrissy doesn't work for Penny. And so that's a challenge we have at tnAchieves because we have 65,000 new students coming to us every year. but we're trying to figure out how to reach each student where they are. And that's where, you know, college coaching comes into play, and summer programs to help with that remedial need comes into play. And so I always sort of come back to supports matter. And as long as you're building that scaffolding, because what we've found is often academics is not about your ability, it's about your background and the situation that you are sort of facing in your home life. And so it's often life challenges and not academic challenges that produce these lesser than scores. So thank you for that. One of the questions asks really quickly about advice. Maybe Millard, this would be best for you as a former athlete. Advice for a college coach on how to help a student balance the responsibility of academics as well as athletics. Time management, right, is always something we're talking about with students.
You know, it's interesting, Chrissy. I recently had a conversation with one of my very good friends who's an assistant coach at the University of Florida in their football program. And he was on the NFL Network. And ironically, we had a conversation about learning styles. Because as a quarterback coach and offensive coordinator, he explained that the way he was able to coach the great Lamar Alexander at Baltimore was to understand what his learning style was, and to ensure that he compensated in a way with all of his players to ensure that that he got to them to make certain that they accomplish exactly what it was. So I think it's a combination of a couple different things. It's understanding exactly where our students are and meeting them there, understanding culturally the competencies around where they're from and how to get towards exactly what it is that they need. But those things have been critical even for me as a student growing up and an athlete getting by, having people in my life that understood culturally where I was, understood what my needs were. Those things help even in the mentorship as we move forward.
Yeah, I think you guys have summed this up so well. Like having someone in your corner, right, does lead to success down the road. Well, I want to say I'm going to kick it back over to Graeme to close us out, but thank you very much. You three are incredibly busy. I appreciate your support and friendship of Tennessee Achieves, and just want to say how grateful we are that you spent some time with us today.
Pleasure.
All I can think is you were answering those final questions there is what a great way to start your day, and what a great way to kind of end the week and get us like rejuvenated to get back to work on Monday. That was really, really great. I appreciate all of your time and your partnership in this work. That there's no doubt that we would not have sent 100,000 students to college by now without your leadership and without the leadership of other directors and superintendents across the state. And so we appreciate everything you've done for us over the last however long we've been working in your community. I think 1 year to 6 years, and for all of our leaders across the state. And we know that we're not going to be able to send our next 100,000 without you. So thank you so much for being here today.